Hey, if there's any inland Northwest people watching this, my artwork is going to be on display at Terrain 15 this year in Spokane, Washington, October 3rd and 4th. You can find three Res Dragon pieces at this show, one of which is an interactive piece where you can listen to Meltdown while staring at a broken mirror and a broken cassette deck. And one of them is even for sale. It's very expensive. First night, October 3rd, is ticketed for a more close interaction with the artist, but the second night is free. And there's more than just a fine arts gallery, there's also music, movies, and tons more. I will be there both nights to ensure my piece is working both nights because a beaten up cassette deck is a very finicky device. So come down to Terrain 15 to not only see my work in person, but also 400 plus local artists of the Inland Northwest. You can find more details about this event in the description of this video. I'll see you at the gallery.
Last year, 2023, I made an album called Alone at the Edge of the Sea. I talk about it quite a lot, but today I want to focus on one particular track called The Bottom. This track sees the listener get trapped at the bottom of the ocean, completely helpless, listening to the surrounding deep ocean world hum ominously with unknown intentions. It's one of my favorite sound design tracks, and one of the first tracks I've done where I built a complex sound environment that wasn't something in the disaster archives. Around September of 2023, I wondered if I could expand upon this idea of being trapped somewhere where you had no control over the world around you, helpless, defenseless, and completely alone. I already did the depths of the ocean, and I thought I needed to go beyond. Into the far reaches of the unknown. Into space. Alone at the Edge of the Sea took a lot out of me. It was an extremely deep and personal project, as well as being a very dense one too, with a thick layer of sound effects from the ocean. When I came up with the idea for Horizon, I decided that I was going to really strip the album back, focusing on just designing the synths and the instrument rather than thick layers of sound effects. After all, I couldn't do that with a concept in space, as space does not have sound. Right? I've never been a huge fan of the science of space and the going-ons of NASA. I'm an artist, not a scientist. So I had to do quite a bit of research about space to familiarize myself with some of its concepts. Don't get me wrong, I have a good foundation already as I'm an avid enjoyer of Nova, but anything deeper than that was beyond me. This quest for more knowledge about space led me to look up, is there actually sound in space? And I was quite surprised by the results. The answer is still no, but at least how we understand it. It's not very easy to explain, and I am not qualified to talk about this in any way that is easy to understand. Trust me, I already tried that and people were still confused. The simplest way to understand why there are sounds in space is that it's sound on a level that we can't hear or process, or at least that's how I understand it. These are electromagnetic and plasma waves translated into sound wave frequencies that we can actually hear. I'll link an article NASA put out explaining this whole process. So while I was in the middle of writing this script, I had PBS on in the background, and they ran a short Idaho-made explanation on electromagnetic waves, showing radio waves as being part of this spectrum, all the way up to gamma rays. Alright, maybe I can summarize this by looking at Wikipedia. Okay, no, this is going into advanced physics, and I am an artist with no college degree who barely even passed high school for that matter because of crippling depression. I am not qualified to talk about this. It's physics. There are actual audio files from space, for the record, like the audio recordings from Perseverance on Mars. They stuck a microphone onto it to record the sounds of the Red Planet, so these are audio files as we understand them. There's also the theoretical sounds of a black hole, since it's so dense with gas that it actually allows sound waves to travel within it. But needless to say, I was over the moon with excitement about all these audio files from space, spending hours listening to and gathering them, digging through the depths of NASA's website and SoundCloud to pluck out every sound file I could find that was interesting to mostly give to Vinny. I actually didn't have much use for most of the files that I found, as, like I said before, I wanted Horizon to be pretty stripped down from sound effects. Not to mention that majority of the samples just did not match the mood that I was going for in Horizon. Only 5 tracks in all of Horizon actually contained samples from space, but it was still a fun journey of sound nonetheless, and very inspirational to learn what NASA is doing to add more dimensions to their research. Speaking of things from space, the cover of Horizon is actually a photo of one of Saturn's moons, Titan, taken by Cassini. And yes, I did double check, the photo is public domain. Another big element to Horizon's sound design is shortwave radio. I dabbled with it in Alone at the Edge of the Sea with the number stations and scattered shortwave samples, but I went an inch deeper with Horizon. I probably spent over 8 hours in total scanning around WebSDR, finding all sorts of weird and unusual sounds. To derail for a second, one of Horizon's bonus tracks, Deep Reaches of Space, is made entirely with shortwave radio samples. You can hear samples of these recordings sprinkled all over Horizon, from Remote, The Journey, to Distant, to Alone Outside, and so on. Of course, shortwave radio had the most influence on the main driving narrative of the album.
Sierra Oscar, Sierra Alpha. Is anyone out there? SOS? Mayday, Mayday. Over.
Horizon has 4 radio messages scattered throughout the album, or 5 if you want to count the last one. The radio effects on all these are quite simple. It's real radios. This is not a digital effect, it's an analog effect. I stuck one radio in another room surrounded by a soundproof enclosure to ensure there wasn't any echoing. With the other one in hand, I read off the script in my office, and that was it. Instant, authentic radio sound effect.
I'm the captain of the starship Addison. If you found this message, it means you've heard my distress signal. Thank God, I didn't think this would work. Look, I'm stranded out here. My vessel suffered heavy damage from a collision with an unknown object. My ship won't start, and I can't repair it.
Unfortunately, it also meant that I had to do all of these in one take, as splicing around other takes would have been obvious because of various electromagnetic interference changing the texture of each radio call.
Hello? This is Sierra Oscar Sierra Alpha. I'm the captain of the starship Addison. Hello? This is Sierra Oscar Sierra Alpha. I'm the captain of the starship Addison.
It took at least 6 takes to get the final ones you hear in the album. Since I've moved since my last album, I had to take the recording of the last 2 radio logs elsewhere, as I didn't feel like screaming, "Why didn't anyone come and save me?" in an apartment building.
Why? Why didn't anyone come and save me?
I'll probably tweak this technique in the future if I decide to use it again, as yeah, this sounds great, but doing single takes like this was a lot of work, and with my current limited mobility, it became even harder. Now, I don't want to get too deep into Horizon's story, as this video is about the album's sound design, and the topic and reasoning for the story is a pretty dark subject that I'd rather not touch upon here. This isn't the Tascate deep dive video. Maybe I'll do a separate video or just a post about it on Patreon if people are interested. Horizon is a very simple track, just an electric guitar being fed through my Strega, and this is basically the entire theme and sound design direction of the whole album. 1 or 2 instruments and the Strega. This track is one of the very few tracks I arranged exclusively in Audacity. You see, around the time I started working on Horizon, Vegas Movie Studio, my first digital audio workstation, suddenly underwent a terrible glitch that made the program virtually unusable. Randomly, the software would break my audio drivers, causing my audio to output extremely loud, horrible static on top of what it was trying to play. It's like there should obviously be audio here. Like, you can still you can vaguely hear this track underneath, and even if I unplug my speakers, like, it's still doing it. This affected my entire computer, forcing me to restart it just to use it again. It's also part of the reason that State of Agony was in production hell for so long, too. I tried in vain to fix it. I uninstalled and reinstalled the program multiple times, even doing a clean, hard reinstall. Didn't work. I contacted Magix, which was about as useful as a screen door in a submarine. So I just decided to uninstall the program and change editors. And I ended up landing in... Yeah, sorry, I had to suck Adobe's dick, don't at me. This album is not my first album made in Audition, that goes to Toscate DE, but more of this album was made in Audition than Toscate was. Only 2 songs were arranged in some way in Vegas first, before having final mixing and touches done in Audition. The rest were all done in Audition, with Alone Outside being the very first song I made exclusively in Audition. Thinking too much. In the middle of working on Alone at the Edge of the Sea, I acquired a new keyboard, the Yamaha PS25. This is a very old and early digital keyboard, made in 1983, with a grand total of 10 voices on it. It does have some built-in, percussion tracks, a very neat chord feature, and the ability to transpose on the fly, which I use that effect in Meltdown. I already mentioned this fun fact about Meltdown in the Toscate explanation video, but Meltdown was recorded at the same time as Home on Horizon. It was a whole recording session for Horizon, but Meltdown, originally I Hate You, stood out as not belonging on Horizon at all. It's perfect for Toscate, though. Anyways, I picked this up secondhand at a thrift store for $25 and just fell in love with its voices. Hooked up to the Strega, this keyboard taps into potential that it probably was not designed for back in 1983. It feels like this keyboard gives the Strega a full keyboard, and the Strega gives the keyboard additional voices. It's quite magical how much these two instruments synchronize with one another. Anyways, that's what this song is, the PS25 and the Strega, which is basically most of the album. No speed changes, I really played this for 8 minutes. This is the first song in the album to contain samples, special ones at that. The shrill, shrieking sounds you can hear throughout the track are the sounds of radio missions from Saturn, as captured by Cassini during its time observing the planet. On a personal note, these haunting cries are some of the most disturbing sounds I've ever heard, and I've heard quite a lot of terrifying noises. Near the end, you can hear the sound of lightning captured by Voyager when it passed by Jupiter. Pulse is the same synth as Horizon, the Strega, and the PS25, except this song uses the combination first, thus I've named this combination after this song. This time there have been speed changes to really bring out the depth of this combination. The original speed and sound of this session was made into the bonus track, Odyssey. Sampled throughout this track is the sounds of Jupiter as captured by Juno during its flyby. These are Aurora Borealis.
Aurora Borealis. At this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the country. Yes.
And what SpaceAudio.com describes as a bow shock when Juno entered through Jupiter's gravity field. I have a deep personal connection with Pulse, so allow me to tangent for several minutes. From 2019 to 2023, I lived inside of a mobile home built in the 70s. It was in pretty rough shape, with mold problems anywhere it was slightly damp. Insulation was non-existent in there, and if it was 90 degrees outside, it was 90 degrees in the trailer, even with AC. And if it was 15 degrees outside, the heater would kick on every 6 minutes to keep the place warm. It's why I have so many bloopers and outtakes of me complaining about the heater turning on because it was right outside my office.
Hello, this is Orintheus, the antagonist of this whole series. The fucking heater is going to ruin everything that I do. It is currently 4:30 in the morning, and I would like to go to bed.
The rooms were so tiny. My previous office was packed so full that 2 people could barely comfortably sit inside of it. However, I was completely unbothered by the state of the trailer because the surrounding property made up for it. The trailer was situated in the back of someone's massive 5.5-acre property. We were tucked behind the main house and free to roam the property at our leisure, which I took full advantage of. I loved walking about the garden, relaxing out in the field, and especially sitting and lying on the grass in our front yard. In winter, I loved to take walks out into the field after it snowed, being the first one to penetrate the fresh layer. You could have me living in a fucking cardboard box, and as long as I was here, I didn't care. This, to me, was home. And we had to move out from here last year. Why? Because the owner of the property, the one living in the main house, passed away. He was my partner's grandfather. We always knew once he passed away we'd have to move, as the property would be sold. We had no say in the matter. His health had begun to decline in 2023, and he passed away in August. 2 months later, we packed up and moved into the place that we're in now. You might be asking yourself why I gave so many details about a property that I used to live at. Doesn't matter. The whole place will be bulldozed over. The house will be gone. The trailer will be destroyed. The field will be non-existent. To make room for a new neighborhood. The week before we moved, I had some time to work on this new concept album I had in my head, so I pulled out my non-packed audio equipment to record something. I recorded a lot of stuff not worth showing, but I did record 3 songs in this session. Horizon, Not From This World, and of course, Pulse. I didn't finish Horizon and Not From This World until much later, but I finished Pulse just before we moved, as it was my favorite of the bunch. It got some slight mastering and audition later on, but I consider Pulse to be the last song I finished in that old trailer of ours. The final piece of art made here before it would be turned into an HOA neighborhood full of houses that I can't buy. Because of that, this track means a lot to me. It's the end of a small 4 years of my life, living in my first home. So it took me a while to get Horizon off the ground. Horizon was the first album where I had the concept first and the music came second. All of my other albums have been the other way around. Yes, even Alone at the Edge of the Sea was music first, concept second. It was a bit of a learning curve to figure out how to make space-sounding music in my usual free-forming experimental way. In case you aren't aware, how I make music is extremely unconventional and frankly disturbing to most musicians if I told them. Or maybe it's actually pretty standard. I don't know, people don't talk to me. Anyways, I recorded myself playing Horizon and Pulse, which I posted to Patreon about 2 months before I released the album. In this video, you can't see me play Horizon because I did it off camera, but you can see me play Pulse. This is all freehand. There's not a secret music sheet off to the side. I'm just feeling the vibe and going where my heart tells me to. I am not musically trained at all, which you can probably tell if you're a classic trained pianist, to be honest. I've never taken music lessons. The most lessons I've gotten were 1 or 2 from my grandma when I was young, and lessons baked into my Yamaha keyboards. So I have Scar Warfare queued up here for in the song list, and this is basically the learn button. That's basically how it taught you it didn't really teach you it shows you the keys, but it doesn't tell you it doesn't tell you what this is, it doesn't tell you what this is. I learned how to play Scarborough Fair by memorizing it.
That is how I learned how to play piano. But this is also why I don't describe myself as a musician. I don't feel like that's accurate to how I make music. Rather, I am a sound designer who happens to make music, is how I describe myself. My music is way more artistic, focusing on feelings, emotion, and mood rather than structure. I do follow some basics of music theory, most notably being playing in key and chords, but for the most part, I just do what sounds good. The goal with my play sessions is just to see what comes out and then fuck about with it later. Structure comes to my work later in editing. Hell, majority of Alone at the Edge of the Sea was done in editing. You could say I focus way more on the producing side than the composing side. I don't seem to be the only one making music like this, as I have found other artists that seem to be going along with this same idea, and if someone wants to tell me what this style of music is called, aside from just experimental, then by all means, please feel free to share it with me. Anyways, so back to the start of this section. Horizon took me a while to get off the ground. For at least 6 months, work on Horizon was just recording a bunch of sessions together, and then never editing them afterwards. I wasn't too satisfied with much of anything in all the recordings I made, and a lot of stuff was left to rot in the Horizon folder, and continues to. Well, in March of 2024, after Vinny streamed my audio pack, I suddenly found myself very motivated to work on sound projects. Gee, I wonder why. So I went to take a look at some of the forgotten files in the Horizon folder, and now with some distance from them, I found that there were some gems in here. In fact, what I found was that I basically had all the pieces for the album. I just needed to put it together, which is what I spent from March to July doing.
No, you weren't. You got sidetracked writing a 55-page script about your life and a novel about demons.
In between that, one of the things that I found were 2 piano sessions. One became Adrift, the other became Remote. I decided to add all of the ship ambient noises to Remote to differentiate it from Adrift enough, as before the 2 tracks were just the piano and were just too similar. Just the mundane sounds of the captain monitoring her ship while something looms in the background. Then I ended up adding similar sounds to Adrift anyways to tie it back into Remote. But for all intents and purposes, Adrift came first. All of these sounds are things that I recorded myself. They're a combination of an old treadmill running, a machine from Walmart, a broken refrigerator fan running, and various switches being pushed and flicked. All of these switches are a plethora of cassette and radio units that I have in my office. Some of them even work. The beeping noises are scanners from the shipping industry, except for the double beep, but I'll come back to that in darkness. This uses the same piano as Remote and Adrift, which I will talk about in this track as it's the one that came before both of them. This piano is a Kingsbury cabinet piano, which is owned by my grandma. Bless her heart, she does not know of the dark works her granddaughter gets up to.
Grandma, do you know of the dark works that your granddaughter gets up to?
No.
Good. It's best that way.
After doing some minor research on the company, Kingsbury was a division of the apparently famous Cable Piano Company. Kingsbury were their more affordable pianos. These pianos were made under the Kingsbury name only until 1953. I wasn't able to fully verify when my grandma acquired the piano, but I know she's had it since my mom was 7 years old, so at least since the 70s. The point being is that this is a very old piano, which was last serviced sometime in the 80s, as I found a service stamp dated 1988 on the inside of it. There's always been this haunting sound to it that, even as a kid, I've always enjoyed. So, naturally, when I started making music, the very first instrument that I used was this piano. No, really, my first album, Rez's Office, contains only one instrument, and it was this exact piano. Sometime in November of 2023, I received yet another rejection letter from an art gallery. In melodramatic anguish, I went over to my grandma's house with my Zoom to play on the piano. The song that I played was The Journey. This song represents 2 ideas. The first is the piano, representing the unrelenting struggle of constantly putting yourself out there and being pushed away over and over again. Also hence the title, The Journey. The second is the track's sound design. You can hear the passing ships in the background, passing over our dear captain, stranded in space.
The emotions came first, but I immediately worked this song into Horizon. Fun fact, this song was originally track 2 for the longest time, playing right after the title track. But sometime down the line I got the idea to put it later in the program after the captain's second message log to serve as the opening for Act 2 of the album. Also, I worried that having Horizon and The Journey back to back would be extremely repetitive to people who can't tolerate that kind of droning sound. The spaceships passing by is just traffic heavily edited, by the way. Oh boy, the longest track on the album. And by far the simplest, actually. Not From This World was a vastly different track for most of Horizon's production, that track being the bonus track, This World. Something about the track was just not working for me, however, and I was at a loss on what to do to change it. Finally, I just got the idea to mess with the speed some more. I had already done so prior, but then I just thought, maybe I need to go deeper. So I did. This is just 2 synths and a keyboard, the Strega and the Vital, and our dear friend the PS25. Actually, the Vital session used here was originally recorded for a scrap song called This House. It was when I was posting this scrap song to Patreon that I got the idea to repurpose that synth for Horizon. Another deeply emotional song that got shoehorned into Horizon with force. You might be noticing a theme here. Distant is simply a custom synth voice from Vital with heavy modifications. I don't even remember them all. I was pretty depressed when I made this track. This is another track that samples actual space sounds. This time it's sounds from Mars. Faintly playing throughout the track is the wind of Mars recorded by Perseverance. This track opens with the sound of a meteorite impacting Mars as recorded by Insight. Late into Horizon's development, I added the same ship ambience noise from Remote to tie the track into the running theme of observing the captain throughout the album, as she slowly loses oxygen in her ship. And to also break up what I began calling the ear massage portion of the album. Not From This World and Distant back-to-back can probably break subwoofers with how intense their low frequencies are. I have yet to try it myself, and I don't recommend doing so. Now this is where the fun part of the album begins. Well, actually it's where the horror elements start, but sound design-wise, this is where the fun begins. The first 3 minutes of this is a Strega and Zero Control session with heavy distortion and effects to darken it. Throughout this 3 minutes you hear this vague metal grinding noises and something moving around, but we'll talk about those later. Playing in the background is also the sonification of the sun playing at half speed. I mostly did this to add an unsettling and unnatural sound to the background. The faint beeping noises playing throughout the track are meant to represent the captain's radar as something inches closer and closer to her ship. What this sound is the confirmation beep on a Nikon camera played at half speed. You might remember this sound from Rez's office. It's the same sound. The clicking and weird scraping noises you hear is a Western capercaillie with some pitch changes. All of this is to build the extremely tense atmosphere after J0NX. Something is clearly wrong, and something else is out there.
There's something looking at me. In my viewport. What is that? It's a ship! Oh my god.
And then something collides with the ship. This collision sound combines at least 5 or 6 metal collision noises played at various speeds and pitches. All of these sound files but one were recorded by me. 2 files are of a moving truck coming to a sudden stop that I originally recorded for the disaster archives. Another is a dryer slamming shut with speed changes. 2 are recordings from where I work. The last one is a sound sampled from a Halley Labs song. And then there's silence. Until... something begins to tap on the ship, almost like it's investigating the surface it's attached to. This is such a simple sound, but it's one of my favorites. One night, I was getting ready to make myself pasta for dinner. I put a pot of water on the stove, and while the induction coils heated up, I noticed they made a faint ticking noise. And that's what this sound is, the clicking and ticking of a stovetop warming up, and panned across your ears to give off the illusion that something is all around you. But that's not all you hear. The next noise to finally grace your ears is a deep, low, moaning sound. You are definitely not alone. There's something out there, and that something is currently attached to your ship, sending its calls vibrating through your hull. Terrifying. These moaning noises are indeed just me, humming into the microphone, but with heavy speed changes and effects, of course. The last sound to enter your hearing before you begin to hear the sounds of your ship getting crushed is a strange pulsing noise. A pulsing noise you've been hearing throughout the album, and that the captain makes reference to in Message 2.
I've also been hearing this very faint pulsing noise that's been reverberating through the hull of my ship. I'm not really sure what that's about.
This sound is my favorite on Horizon, and I've been very, very coy about talking about how I made it because it's a very, very, very stupid sound. It was this one, but I lost the charger for it, so it doesn't work anymore. But thankfully, I have a second one. That's basically how I made the sound. Yes, really, I made the sound by sticking my Zoom inside of a dryer while it was full of clothes, then on the outside, I rubbed up against it with a sex toy. The rest of this track is then filled with more metal slamming and crunching noises, takes of me growling and snarling in slow-mo, and of course the deep thumping noise of something rubbing up against the ship, which, yes, is still a sex toy. I'm happy to ruin that sound for you. String here is from Vital with some pitch bending done in Audition. I found out how to do this in Vital actually, quite obviously so, but the pitch changing here was done in Audition. Eventually, the creature lets go, more of the metal slamming noises from where I work, and then we return to the sun sonification from earlier in the track, transitioning into... What a sinister title. This is another track that started out as an emotional vent track that then got forced into Horizon. As I worked on the album, I ended up replacing most of the original sound design elements with new ones to better follow up from and connect to Darkness, as well as the album on the whole. It took a lot of tinkering, but what I ended up adding to this was some heavily modified metal scraping that I did back in 2022. That place that I used to live, that I mentioned in Pulse, also had a pile of scrap metal behind its massive shop. Yes, this huge building was a massive shop. Anyways, I don't remember which track in particular that I recorded these for originally. I want to say it was The Creature from the Black Abyss, but I experimented with a few pieces from this rusted pile, scraping them about on concrete in circles around the Zoom. heavily modified the sound in Audition, and got the resulting movement noises you hear in the beginning of Alone Outside. While recording all of these eerie metal noises, I also noticed in the shop that there was an old wood-burning stove. I opened it and noticed it made rather spooky noises when opened slowly, so I played with it for about 5 minutes. That's where the metal creaking sounds come from. Anyways, the synth is another Vital session, which I took down another octave after its initial release. This track also features a lot of samples of Shortwave Radio, mostly from Russia. The strange beeping and gong noise that comes in around the halfway mark is a WeFax transmission played at half speed. So, there might be map data in that signal if you could decode it. I also didn't realize this until writing up the credits, but this is the only track on Horizon to use FL Studio, which was used for the sinister beat of this track. There are no percussion tracks on any other song but this one and the bonus track, Odyssey. That percussion track is... Actually, we don't need to get into that right now. Fun fact, the first title of this track was actually Alone Outside a Dungeon, but I shortened it to the more terrifying Alone Outside. Yes, I did watch 2001: A Space Odyssey for inspiration. What gave you that idea? Like I said in Remote, Adrift came first, but it was just the piano and the pulsing noise for a while. I wasn't entirely satisfied with that, but I wasn't sure what to add. A rewatch of 2001 gave me my answer. The sound design of this entire track is based on those extremely tense moments in 2001, where you just hear Dave Bowman breathing in his suit. An early version of this track sampled this sound directly to see how it would jive with the rest of the track before I then breathed into a bucket for 6 minutes.
Right. Hopefully I'm recording. This is me breathing into a bucket.
Alright, actually I did it for 3 minutes because I got bored, but that's how I achieved that sound. Yes, it was ridiculous looking as it sounds. The space door opening was created from an old automatic door at one of my local thrift stores. It has such a loud, defining sound that's so otherworldly to me. The metal latch noises are a top stock cart from Walmart. One of these bastards. Horrible cart, Walmart. Barely holds anything compared to rocket carts. What am I supposed to do with my cardboard, I also mixed in a cargo bay door from an aircraft opening, as well as some other compressed air noises that I had. Speaking of which, the hissing sound of the air releasing playing throughout the track was from a can of compressed air. Or, I guess, refrigerant, as Technology Connections has taught me. Either way, it's one of those cans that's making that noise. Pulsing noise is a dildo. What, did you think I made the sound some other way? The big finale of the album, and such a simple track in hindsight. Once again, our lovely friend, the PS25 and the Strega. The beginning, where the track is swelling, is just the Strega. Eventually, the keyboard comes in later. The speed of this session was changed to bring out the depth of this combination once again, and also a lot of reverb. Near the end of the album's production, I also added some extra chords near the end to help separate it from the rest of the track, as well as help build the intense emotions of this piece. This track is just a punch in the gut after the final message from the captain.
I was right here. I was right here. The captain of the Starship Edison. Signing off. Goodbye.
But why is it called home? I'll leave that thought up to you. Also contains the same vibrating noises that we've been hearing throughout the album, and closer, louder cries of the planet itself, before ending with a sound that's similar to an explosion. That sound was sampled from an old shareware game, Megapede.
How did I used to do that? Holy crap! Ow, my ears! Ow, my soul! No more! No!
What a stupid sound, I love it. Believe it or not, but I did not take this idea from 2001. I decided to use this specific version of Daisy Bell because there was something really haunting about it. Which is funny because even though I was not inspired by 2001 to use Daisy Bell, Stanley Kubrick and I were inspired by the same piece of audio. And that's all I can say about 4.2. Aside from the fact that the static is actually just a shortwave radio recording of empty air. And that's basically an explanation of the sound design of Horizon and some of the ideas behind those sound design elements. Again, I wanted to keep this album pretty simple and stripped down to just a few spare instruments, really bringing in the focus of this album to the radio messages and the captain's plea. Also, to really highlight the loneliness and isolation that the captain feels. After all, there's a song called Remote and Adrift. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening. If you made it this far, I'll let you in on my next album project. Now that both State of Agony and Horizon are finally off my plate, I can shift focus to a new album project. I want to do another story album like Horizon, but since I've already done the ocean and space, where should I go next? Uh-oh.